Thank you for joining us for this next session, A Road Worth Traveling, Researcher to Researcher. Dr. Keila Miles, a Learning Impact Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists and an early career researcher, is sitting down with Dr. Ned Braunstein, Executive Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Global Patient Safety at Regeneron, to talk about his perspective on the research path throughout his career and advice for early career researchers starting down this road. So Keila, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you again to Research America for continuing to provide a platform for early career scientists such as myself. Ned, it is a pleasure to sit down with you and to chat with you just about your experiences thus far. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, so I'm going to jump right into it if that's okay with you. We only have a brief time, unfortunately, so I would love to, if we had time, to just talk more about your entire career path. But given our time restraints today, I would just ask, could you start us off by just sharing with us some pivotal transitions? Can you just share what it was like to transition from your earning your doctorate and then entering the research workforce?
Sure, thanks, Keila. And I'm really excited to be here and have this opportunity to talk to our entire audience today. So I had a couple of important transitions. I first went to medical school, and during the course of medical school, I realized that I was interested not just in practicing medicine, but also in doing basic research. So while I was a medical student, I had discussions with the faculty at my school about different opportunities. And particularly, I was interested in immunology. And most of the advice I got from the faculty where I was at, which was at Northwestern Medical School, was that at that time, they thought the best path for me was to first get my clinical training and then do my scientific training. And so that being the advice I got, seemed to be the best advice at the time. I did that. I did an internship and residency in medicine. I did clinical rheumatology fellowship. But while I was doing that training, I sought out researchers. I was at Columbia University, at Columbia Medical Center. So I sought out researchers in immunology, and we were talking about different opportunities. And their advice was at that point that I should become an expert in this new field of molecular immunology. And so that seemed like a good advice, and they pointed me in a variety of directions to different researchers I could work with. I ended up working in the Laboratory of Immunology at the NIH, at that time, one of the leading places to learn molecular immunology. And I spent 4 years at the bench, not seeing patients, just becoming a good molecular immunologist. I think one of the things, thinking about my career in retrospect, is that at each stage along the way, I tried to become expert in whatever it was I was learning at that time. You know, it takes about 10,000 hours of doing something to become an expert in it. And thinking about that, 3 years of residency, you can become somewhat of an expert. Actually, it takes longer than that to become an expert in medicine. 4 years at the bench, I certainly spent more than 10,000 hours at the bench with my pipette in hand and doing that research. And that then opened the door for me to get my first grants and get jobs in academic medicine. And I spent 13 years at Columbia teaching and being an independent researcher, having my own lab, having grad students, et cetera. But after a period of time, I realized that I wanted to do something more with what I was doing. And I had some different ideas. So I discussed those different ideas with friends and colleagues. I had some friends who'd gone into industry. They talked to me about that. I had some other ideas about online teaching and online medicine, and I spoke to some of my colleagues at Columbia, but the idea of going into industry and maybe having a larger impact than what I could do at the university appealed to me. So I made that transition. And then along the way, it was a matter of being open to opportunities as they presented, saying yes to opportunities as they arose. So, I mean, that's been my way. Ultimately, I came to Regeneron because I had a postdoc. Well, it was no longer a postdoc. I had a friend who was working here, and he was vice president, and he had been a postdoc in my lab, and we kept in contact. And he had been trying to get me to come to Regeneron after over many years. And I knew the chief scientist, and he told me about some of the research that was going on here, and it sounded very exciting. So I love great research and an opportunity. I thought to be involved on the early stage of a growing company. So that was a new opportunity and something new for me, but I took a gamble on myself and Regeneron, and I like the people here that I met. So I made the change to join Regeneron in 2009. I made the decision in 08. I joined the company in January of 09.
So just based on what you shared, you pointed out, I feel, a lot of great attributes that early scientists, early researchers can really relate to, and I think pick up on, and that it sounds like you had a lot of discussions with colleagues and identified experts just about your interests based on your foundational skills. Can you speak to one, like how you were able to build on those foundational skills, particularly in relationship building, that really set you up to say yes to Regeneron?
Well, building a career, I think, is like building an edifice. And you do so by establishing expertise in one thing. And then once that that becomes a solid trait or expertise that you can rely on, then you can seek to extend that and expand on that in a different way. I knew I could rely on my medical training. Then I learned the attributes of a basic scientist by working in that lab and learning how to think like a scientist. So those became core traits. I then became very good at writing grants. I had to, if I was going to be successful in academia. So I learned how to write grants, but also I was on study sections and I learned how to review grants, and I saw what interest in reviewers. So I became very good. And then I gave talks. So I became very good about communicating about science, and I became an expert communicator. And then those traits, those expertises allowed me to then try something new in industry, because I knew I could rely on the expertise that I had, and I was told that those would be important attributes in any career in industry. And indeed, they are important attributes. And I learned that. And so even though I didn't know anything about drug development when I joined Merck back in 1999, I learned drug development, and I learned it from the experts. There are a lot of experts there. And I sat in sessions, and I became an expert in drug development and how one does that, and by asking a lot of questions. And I could then turn that expertise when I came to a company like Regeneron, and that was all valuable, and it allowed me to build my career here by adding. Now I have expertise in drug safety and a variety and the regulatory affairs I gained along the way. So, each of these things was a block that I could add to the edifice of my career that allowed me to progress. But each one had to be solid. I think my advice to young people is to become expert in, the first thing is to become expert in something, right? And invest the time to become expert in something. That's then something you can rely on. No matter what else you're going to do in your career, that's something you can rely on. Then you can start to look and say, all right, what can I add to that? And each person's going to have something different. Even the first block is going to be different for different people. It doesn't matter really what that first block is. Just make sure it's solid.
I personally appreciate that because I think oftentimes it seems that there's so many areas for growth that oftentimes it's difficult or it's overwhelming to sort of select one and really hone in and focus and make sure that that's solid. But I really like that you pointed out, like, it doesn't necessarily matter like where you start, as long as you're being intentional and really being focused on building out that skill. I really appreciate that point. While you were talking, you mentioned briefly that you have served as a principal investigator and you have had graduate students. So can you just sort of share what sort of stands out for you as far as a good mentor-mentee relationship? And if I could just sort of lead you in a sense, you talked a lot about just being able to ask questions. So how can we sort of cultivate that safe space between mentor and mentee that we're asking questions as frequently as we need to?
You have to create a safe environment for young people. And I've gotten better, it's the thing that I've gotten better in my career, but I think being genuinely curious about a person, about their thought process, about what's important to them and why they're doing what they're doing or proposing what they're doing, I think is one way that I've used to try to create that safe space. I mean, there are other ways to do it, but at least in a generic sense, I think that's how I can answer your question. Obviously, there are different, in any unique situation, one might even have to ask, or you might notice somebody's hesitant and you might say, well, what's holding you back here? Is there anything I'm doing that's holding you back? And be honest. I think if you're humble about the role you might be playing in holding somebody back, then that might in and of itself create the safe space for somebody.
That I think is, I know it touched on me because I think so often, thinking back to my experience as a graduate student, I didn't really think to tap into the humbleness and the humility of my PI, and that, they're willing, or really truly acknowledge their willingness to assist with the process. And that can be like a hard relationship to cultivate. But I really like that you said, show that you're genuinely curious, because I think that is a quality that shines out, especially in STEM. And you can't really fake that. You really have to demonstrate, like, through genuine curiosity, your passion for the area of research that you're in. So just sort of going back, we started talking about like transitions, and we moved on to foundational skills. So can you just speak to sort of how that genuine curiosity has served you well as an R&D leader? When you're in team building situations, or even just your day-to-day, like how often do you find that you're still reaching back to these foundational skills, and how have they sort of evolved in your current role?
Well, I think the curiosity element is very important. I lead a variety of teams and meetings, and I'm involved in mentoring people through some of our governance committees. And people, what I've learned is I don't always know what drives somebody or what's the motivation behind a proposal that's being made. Everybody in a large company like ours, everybody's different. I like that about that. I mean, I'm invigorated by our differences, and I try to bring my curiosity, if you will, forward by asking, why, where does this proposal come from, or what is the issue that you're trying to get at? What is the question that you're trying to answer? What motivates you to answer that question? And because I know I don't have the answers to everybody, but sometimes I don't even know what the right questions are to ask. So I just try to start out open-ended, in an open-ended way, and let the person tell me what's bringing them forward and what's bringing them there, or the team, if the case may be. You know, in industry, we work in teams, and teams come and do presentations to management, and these days I'm management. But you have to, I have to understand, well, why are they making that presentation? What is the problem they're trying to solve? And, you know, and what's the approach they use, and why did they choose that approach? And then I can begin to maybe provide guidance, or at least understand what it is that they're proposing and they're coming to me with.
Again, I keep writing down personal notes for myself because I'm really enjoying like these little tidbits of just really like it's gold. So a couple of things that you mentioned that I really want to highlight. One, you said that we're invigorated sort of like by our differences, and creating a safe space in which you can ask why. It's sort of like you're looking at my list of questions and you know exactly what I'm going to ask next. But we know that diversity of thought and diversity of experience really drives, you know, the STEM ecosystem. So I think an issue that a lot of companies are concerned with is just how are we creating a sustainable model that we're always being able to improve the STEM workforce and improve the research ecosystem by making sure our workforce is, you know, has or represents this diversity of thought and this diversity of experience. So given that you are a leader, is there any advice that you can offer to, you know, early career scientists that are looking for, you know, similar experiences? How can we work to sustain this model, and that, you know, diversity of thought is, you know, a centerpiece?
Well, I'm going to admit that I'm not an expert in DEI, but it's something I'm working to become an expert in, and it's going to take 10,000 hours of working at this and doing this, and you know, so okay, you know, you have to start doing this. So and Regeneron, the senior leaders here are participating in diversity courses, and I'm actively involved in that, and we're also committed. So that's what we're doing internally. So, and I think you need to be in a company where this is forefront in people's minds, because we're going to get better at it as we practice it more. But not just what we're doing here at the company, but we're a company that is reliant on a diverse and scientifically trained workforce, right? I mean, we're a science company. We need scientists producing our drugs. We need scientists in the laboratories. We need scientists developing our drugs. We need scientists writing up our study results. All along the way, we need people with scientific expertise. So we're also trying to help build that scientific workforce through strategic investments. For example, we made a $100 million investment in a 10-year commitment to support the Regeneron Science Talent Search, and that's through the Society for Science. And part of that is a $3 million annual funding of their STEM outreach and equity programs. And we've gone beyond that now also to partner with the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity to help provide additional training to some of their equity partners that are working with the society in trying to help. This is mostly at the high school level. And then more locally, we're involved in elementary education, both here in Westchester and in the Hudson Valley, in trying to have scientific outreach and, fertilize the environment, because we know there's young talent everywhere, and we need to interest them in STEM careers, and not just interest them, but we need to provide them with some of the foundational thinking and mentorship and opportunities, so that if they are interested, they can take sort of the first steps along the way into the necessary education that'll be, that they'll need in order to be successful in that type of career.
Thank you again. And again, thank you to your commitment as well as Regeneron's commitment to make sure that the workforce is ready for what who knows what's coming down the line next. But I know that based on all the items that you listed, it really sounds like you are working to create equitable practices in STEM. So I believe that is our time for the interview. I can't thank you enough, Ned, for just taking the time to talk with me. Like I said, I have so much gold here that I am looking forward to translate into actual gold based on the advice that I've received today. Thank you again.
Okay. Right, and thank you for this opportunity, and I hope I was able to help some of the young people who are listening today.